Welcome back to another episode of Honest Careers. Today, I have Ryan Cofrancesco, actually my cousin Ryan, who has a very interesting and a very non-traditional career pathway that we're going to be walking you through today. His transition from working in public relations, studying public relations, to moving across the world, becoming a tour guide in Rome, in the Vatican, and then also becoming a cruise director, a program director for Viking Cruises. So we're gonna jump in all of this. Ryan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and I love the theme that you're working on here, non-traditional things. It's making me realize how sort of unusual my path is and how much fun it was looking back on it.
Okay, I'm super excited to have you here today because you've got a pretty unique skill set and also a job that, within for a lot of context allowed you to travel around the world. We're going to be exploring kind of the difference between a job that really offered you full kind of time freedom and the ability to kind of go anywhere and do whatever, and then the pros and cons of moving into a job that might have some more financial incentives and some more stability, and kind of walking through and giving an accurate depiction of all of that.
I went abroad with about $1,500 and a suitcase.
Yep.
And years later, having been there for a long time, people always ask, how did you have the courage to move there? And my answer is kind of, I never did. I never moved there. I just went and never returned. Like, I didn't go to the airport on the day that I had my flight back. So it kind of, I was taking it season by season, very literally, for 9 years in Rome.
Gotcha. Tell me about that first, $1,500 going over there. Now, Italy, it's not like Scandinavian countries. It's not crazy high cost of living. Would you recommend, you think if someone's sitting there right now and they're like, I've got $1,500, I mean, maybe I can get a plane ticket. How was that first couple of months being there? What did you do? How did you make money? How did you survive?
Yeah, I would recommend it to people if you feel called to it, because I think it's potentially wonderful. I can also tell you there's a lot of challenges. So at the beginning, I got a Italian course that I went to that was pretty immersive. I was getting there, I think, at 8:30 in the morning and staying until 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and there was no common language among the students. I was from the United States. I remember there was a Mexican guy there was a woman from Iceland, and other European countries, so the teacher had to really do everything in Italian. And that's what I was there to do. That's what I was doing. I was studying in the class, and I was going home and doing homework literally for 3 or 4 hours. It was like 8 hours a day of studying Italian. And that was great for about a month as I was spending that $1,500. And then that was getting low. And I began wondering if I could get a job. So I was looking if it was possible to wait tables or something, which I had done in Washington. And in that period of looking for a job in Italy, I went to a tour at the Colosseum. I went to the Colosseum, and at the door of the Colosseum, someone asked me if I would be willing to buy a tour. And it was like $10 or 15 euros or something like that. And so I bought it, went inside, found a huge group, like 60 people around one Italian guy in the center who was just finishing the tour and did not care that I had just joined. And it must have been fate, because I went and complained to him and said I paid for the tour, wasn't very good, finished really quickly. He offered me to go on a free tour of the Roman Forum. And that tour guide turned out to be a British woman. And just making conversation, I asked her, how does a British woman end up being a tour guide in the Roman Forum? And she said to me, do you want to start on Thursday? And I didn't really start on Thursday, but I really did quickly meet her boss and interview with the company that was organizing the tour guides. And within about, I think it was 5 weeks later, I was doing tours of St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican.
Gotcha. So that's super interesting, right? You're there in Italy. You learn how to speak the language. You take a course. I guess one thing I do want to clarify. So you're saying how long in that fully immersive course before you were able to kind of get around? I mean, how long did that take?
Yeah, great question. It was fast. It was fast. I bet within a month, I was going into stores and holding my own in transactional Italian. And I was small talking with people I met. In reality, in Italy, most of the time when my Italian ran out, people would speak English with me. And I have friends that stayed in Italy for a decade and never really learned to speak Italian, so you can get by. In fact, one of the biggest challenges I had in those early years is as I spoke Italian, the Italians would switch and want to try their English because they could hear my accent and they wanted to try English, even if they didn't speak English. They would rather fail with their English than have me fail with my Italian.
Nice.
And it took me about a year and a half to get to the point that they would not switch languages on me. But I was having conversations at about a month. At I think a month and a half, I had an Italian girlfriend that didn't speak any English. And I clearly remember about a month and a half in having the state of the relationship conversation with a woman that didn't speak English.
See, that's I think a pretty good litmus test there.
Yeah.
So what is it like, this is your first job in Italy. What's that gig like? Was it good money? Was it good time? Walk us through what that experience was.
For finances, what I can tell you is for the 9 years, I was paying my bills, having a nice place to live, having some time off, and really enjoying it. The business plan changed a lot, but I think the most interesting one, and one of the first ones I did, is being at the Vatican or in the neighborhood right outside the Vatican in Rome and offering to do a free tour of St. Peter's Basilica for whatever passersby would stop and listen. Literally on the sidewalk, just asking people if they wanted a free tour. Once I got someone to listen to me, I had an assistant working with me that would tell other passersby, he's doing a free tour if you want to go join. And we would accumulate a crowd doing this. And back in those years, St. Peter's Basilica was quite open to this. And in fact, I can't even believe it, we were working without a microphone for years.
Wow.
Later, they added a rule that you had to have a microphone and people had to have earpieces. But in the early years, we were accumulating the crowd as we're going, doing a truly free tour of St. Peter's Basilica. At the end of that tour, I would tell whoever was still listening to me that I was about to do a paid tour of the Vatican museums and the Sistine Chapel if they wanted to come along. And that's how I was making my living, by getting the people to pay for the second tour and paying also an assistant out of that money so that they were making their living at it as well. You asked about my education, and I went to university and all of that, but that was never so useful as having to give a presentation every day that was effective enough to make that day's money and that month's rent every day.
Gotcha. Yeah, and it's not a crazy concept. We see it all the time. You get the free offer, and then it gets you to the upsell, right?
Right.
And so I have a couple technical questions. Number one is, how long was that free tour, and how much were you charging for the paid tour?
I was doing 45 minutes to an hour. I wish I was doing 30-minute tours for free. The paid tours, I believe, was 25 euros pretty much throughout the entire time I was there.
Gotcha. And that's super interesting as well. I know you do this for quite a while. For, I think you were saying 9 years. What made you want to make a change? What led to the transition that we're about to talk about, of moving to something that was a little bit different, being a cruise director, a program director for Viking?
What happened is I learned about Viking River Cruises. That was 200 people on the ship. It was in Europe. It was inland on rivers. And it had a schedule that allowed me to work 1 month on, 1 month off. That might have been a big selling point, because on the ocean liners, I know you go away for 6 to 9 months, which I was never interested in.
So what is a cruise director? What does a program director do?
Sure. The cruise director is hosting the cruise from the time that clients arrive from the airport to the time that they leave the cruise ship a week later. And that's everything from meeting them at the taxi or the bus and having a smile and hoping to make them feel a little better as they arrive onto the ship, to helping them know what's going on from day to day in the program of the cruise, to giving presentations to help them learn about the local geography and history and culture and arts where they're going to. And very importantly, and very unusual with Viking, the cruise director was running the excursions. And it was also different from the ocean liners, that there was an included excursion every day. Every single day, everyone can get off the boat and go with a tour guide on a bus, or sometimes not on a bus, to see things. And that means supervising 4 to 6 tour guides and 4 bus drivers and restaurants sometimes, all of that being coordinated by the cruise director, or program director as we were called.
Gotcha. So it's like your past experience as a tour guide. This is like you're the person in charge of the tour guides, but for a cruise where it's very boutique. People are paying a lot of money. There's a couple hundred people on the ship, so not the massive ships that you'd normally think about. So what was that like right? That sounds like a lot of responsibility.
I was working in uniform on duty about 100 hours a week for a month straight. And that was unusual to the position of cruise director or program director. The other positions, everyone else on the ship was working less hours per day, but much longer amounts of time. They were working multiple months.
Hmm.
What I found was the range of responsibilities was mind-bogglingly wide. Not only was I helping 200 tourists enjoy their vacation, but I was also representing and sort of leading and helping a crew of 50 and making sure that the tourists were tipping them and making sure that things were going relatively well for their morale. Of course, the cruise director has to work with the team of the hotel manager and the captain and the maitre d' and all of the other department heads. And it might have been a little unusual for me being an American. I was one of the very few Americans working for Viking at the time, and I was always the only native English speaker in the crew, which made me a big interface between those big audiences of guests and crew.
Gotcha. And so you're talking about going around to these different destinations. You just mentioned working with the maitre d'. Like, it sounds like there's probably a good bit of knowledge that's required. How much did you have beforehand? How much did you learn training through Viking, to be able to actually succeed in that role?
So going into that role, I have to say Viking's training program is stellar. It is really fantastic in getting us prepared. I was very knowledgeable how to be a tour guide and sort of had some training in training tour guides and leading that. Everything else I had to learn for the job. So I was working in a region I had never visited. I was on the Rhine River between Amsterdam and Basel, going through Germany and France. All of that geography I had to study and learn for the job. Everything about how to work in a hotel and on a cruise ship had to be taught to me by Viking. And they did a really amazing job in in-person training, and later with virtual training. We were doing virtual training long before it was cool.
That makes complete sense to me. So if someone has a background in hospitality, if they already have some skill set, some experience, it wouldn't be crazy for them to move into the new role or move into a similar position. What do you think in terms of, what is your thought? Do you got to be able to speak other languages? Was there any kind of other skill sets that, if you were applying or you wanted to move into a role like this, that would be pretty essential?
Yeah. So to become a cruise director, we weren't required to speak local languages in the regions where I worked. In some places you are. In France, in Russia, in China, in Southeast Asia, you had to speak the local language. So that eliminates most people off the bat. But in the countries that were Germanic speaking, which for me was Germany and the Netherlands and Switzerland, and also I know on the Danube River where they're going through Austria and Germany and also Hungary, everything's done in English on the business level. So the cruise directors can speak only English. And I've sometimes recommended people to try it out if they have some strong background in giving presentations and leadership. But to tell you the truth, it's almost unheard of for Americans to have any of these jobs.
Right.
In fact, other than cruise director, I know of 0 cases in all of Viking and in all of the river ships, no American is on the crew. They're not working in the hotel or the restaurants or anything else like that.
Right. Yeah, I've definitely heard that. Well, Ryan, at this point, I'm looking at things. You're working 100 hours a week, right? It's an intense job. It's super busy. There's a lot of pressure, it seems. There's got to be some advantages, right? What made you want to stay around? Was there any upside? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah, there was a lot of upsides. One of them was I was in 4 countries every single week.
Okay.
And as cruise director, I was getting to go to the sites. So any place that the guests, the clients were going to, I was going there to host their experience. I was making sure their tour guides and bus drivers and restaurants were there. So travel was pretty awesome for me. I was always on the job in those places, but it was still pretty amazing. It was still pretty awesome. It was also a perfect job for me as a public speaker that I was giving an amazing amount of presentations every single week. I was giving a 3-hour scenic sailing talk, speaking into a microphone that was booming throughout the entire ship, just talking about what we're sailing by. And what we're sailing by was the Middle Rhine and the Lorelei Rock and the most castles of any riverbed in the world. So that was a huge highlight for me. and finances had become really good. I was now working for a very large company in Viking Cruises. There was stability in that. I knew my schedule in March for the entire year. And the schedule that I always chose was to work 1 month on, 1 month off, and have the winter off. So effectively working 5 months a year, I was making a really good living.
Was the money that you made in those 5 months, was that actually enough to sustain you throughout the year, or were you kind of like scrapping and you had to go find other jobs?
When I left Viking, I moved to Florida and got an office job, working 9 to 5. So 40 hours a week, every week of the year. People are familiar, I think, with these jobs in the United States. Working 5 months a year with Viking, I was making nearly double what I was what I made every week working in an office in Florida.
Crazy. And so was that like base compensation? I mean, were there tips? I mean, did you get tips? Were there a lot of like, how did that work?
Sure. So in my position as cruise director, the majority of our pay was tips. I think it was like 80% of what we were making was tips, which meant it probably varied. I don't know if maybe other cruise directors, I know some of them made more than me. I suspect a lot of them made less than me. So it was performance based. And that was exhilarating. It was also stressful. You can't have a bad day when you're working for tips, because also and I think all of us learned the hard way that 15 seconds of being in a bad mood will cost you 100% of your tip for the week from an individual.
Hmm.
You give someone a bad feeling and you're done. So yeah, it was a high percentage of what I was making was tips.
Okay, we're gonna kind of wrap up here, Ryan. But I really want to now. Obviously, you didn't. You're not still working with Viking. It's not something you've done forever. So I want to kind of get your gauge. I know I don't think anyone's really cruising right now, or if it is, it's very very small. So would you ever go back, and would you ever who would you recommend it to?
I would go back. I pre-pandemic did contact Viking saying I'm available if I could come back. When I contacted them, it was too late for that season,
Sure.
and now it's 2020 where nothing is sailing. So yeah, I would be open to it now because I've learned a lot in my life that I think I would enjoy it even more. Things that have improved my life, for example, on the cruise ship, alcohol is a very big part of the culture with the guests, but also with the crew. I've given up drinking alcohol and my life has gotten exponentially better.
Right.
I think if I was in that position of getting that money and that job, I would enjoy it much, much more now because of that. So I would go back because of that. Also, I've learned to concentrate and develop gratitude in my life, which would have helped me manage 100 hours in uniform more easily. I struggled with it then. Now I think I could do it very effectively and with much more joy than I did. So I would go back to it. Would I recommend it to other people? Maybe do that work first. Because if you're going to join a cruise ship and have any of these non-traditional careers for the fun of it, that might not be the best idea. You got to do it because you're passionate about it, because you want to do whatever the role is, the job that you're doing, and because you feel like you're ready for the adventure. It's not someplace where you gain stability.
I love that. And, I think that's just a good tip overall. And it's definitely something I've learned in my life as well. It's like, especially when you're young, like the first time going around and doing something, it's like your priorities are all sorts of messed up in your head. And then you also have this stress, and then you're not sure, you've never really dealt with that amount of stress. So you can turn to other things, and it can really wear you down even more than if you were just working, and you're kind of combining all that in. So I think having that perspective of having the gratitude, I think the tip with alcohol there is so freaking on point. And I think anyone who's worked in consulting or worked in any culture where alcohol is a big part, yeah, I mean, you guys know, I mean, it's a force to be reckoned with, and it's fun, but it also can get to points where it can be not fun as well. So I think that's really great advice. Now, Ryan, I want to ask, what's next for Ryan Cofrancesco? And if people kind of want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Sure. Everything, of course, is up in the air. And in 2020, we don't know, I think, much about the future. But I'm reaching back into the history of the things I've told you about to create new things for myself in Florida now. So I've been developing Pax Ryan Entertainment. I've always liked Pax Ryan. PAX is the Latin word for peace. And so Pax Ryan Entertainment right now is a series of interviews that I'm doing in the local community where I live now to highlight It began with local artists, but I'm really looking at local businesses, anyone doing things in the community that I think creates peace. And I mean that very broadly, not just the hippie sense of it. But for example, last night I did an interview with owners of a pool hall, because I've noticed in the pool hall, people from diverse political backgrounds get together and enjoy themselves, not caring about their political backgrounds, for one thing. And to go even further, sometimes they talk about politics and it's peaceful and constructive and everything's okay. It's everything opposite what you see on Facebook
What a concept.
and on Twitter and those places. So I'm going to develop that a lot more through Pax Ryan Entertainment. You can find that on Facebook, facebook.com/Pax Ryan Entertainment. I'm going to do more interviews like that. I'm going to look at also things internationally that I think are improving my community locally. And while I'm doing that, I'm also writing the book that will be amazing about all the stuff I've just begun telling you about.
Really excited to see that. And I just want to clarify as well, the community he's talking about, this is Sarasota. This is the Gulf Coast of Florida. So if you guys are around that area and you're interested in collaborating with Ryan, please, hit him up, Pax Ryan Entertainment. And Ryan, thanks so much for joining us. Guys, if you enjoyed this episode, if you enjoyed hearing about this non-traditional career, I know cruise director is something I had definitely never heard about. But when Ryan told me, hey, I have this job where you can work 5 months on and have the rest of the year off, make actually a pretty substantial income, see the world, get some experience. And if you came from a communications background or you enjoy public speaking, I know for myself, no doubt for you, if you're out there and you're like, I love speaking and I don't even need to get paid to get in front of people to speak, maybe something you should consider doing and consider learning more about. But thanks so much for joining us here, Ryan. Guys, if you have comments, if you have questions, if you have feedback, please let us know down in the comments below. And thanks again for tuning in. Thanks again, Ryan, for joining.
Thanks, Tony. This was great.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for watching. I want to encourage you to go and check out our digital marketing playlist. There's a bunch of videos that have a ton of information and good insights on the world of digital marketing. Go and check it out.